and welcome to the Double Shot with your favourite cousins, or Mishpoche family, James and Alex Fitzgerald. Manishma, cuz, Manishma.
Welcome back. Now, we hit, did you know, a record number of listeners in the month of October. I wasn't there for 3 of them. You weren't there for 2 of them. And we've had guests pretty much on every episode. So pressure's on for you and me to really, really meet the level set by everyone who's filled in over the past month or so. Producer Nick included, who, by the way, joins us in the background for those listeners who heard him last week.
I know, producer Nick finally got a gig. There was a lot of riffraff around the office about that, actually. I think, there's maybe just a bit more flavour, a bit more spice when it's not just us, cuz. What can I say?
Oh, well, look, we'll try not to take it personally. In any event, it is our pod, so we're back. You're back from Israel. Tell me, question number 1, did you get to swim in the Dead Sea?
I did. I swam in the Dead Sea, and it's the coolest feeling. You bobble around. Me, my dad, and my brother just bobbled around because it's so dense with salt and minerals that you just float. Like, you can't even... Like, you sort of try to maneuver, and then your body, like the buoyancy of your body just maneuvers you back around. And for those of you who can't see, I was so salty. And I'll just be swimming in a big sea of Bernard. But the way that it makes your skin feel is just amazing. Like, it feels like you've just got oil all over your body. It's quite amazing. And then, of course, we went to the old city in Jerusalem, which is an experience I would highly recommend for anybody, no matter religion or anything. Just an amazing center of, history and religion colliding. It's amazing.
Oh, awesome. Well, look, I have to admit, I'm desperate to check out the Dead Sea, not the Black Sea, the Dead Sea. But and the reason I am is because when I was over in Europe myself, got the chance to swim in the Mediterranean Sea and noticed it's really salty. And someone said to me at that point, "Oh, you've got to see the Dead Sea is like a whole nother level." Apparently, it's like more than 50% salt. Have I made up a stat there?
I'm not sure, but I was swimming in it, and I was thinking, when I leave here, I need to find out more information about this because it's in the middle of the desert. It's the weirdest, oddest, thing. I don't know. But I read that it's 10 times saltier than your average water.
34% salt, producer Nick has confirmed. So there you go. In fact, let's make that the stat fact of the week.
Stat fact. 34% of the Dead Sea is muck salt and probably kosher salt.
And look, you did go over there for a partly work purpose. Obviously, there was a bit of travel and holiday in there, but there was some work component to it as well. You've gone to the Global Wellness Institute's Wellness Expo or conference summit. Conference, Summit, Expo, one of them. Tell me, what'd you learn? What'd you learn?
Do you remember that ad when we were kids? See you at the expo. Yeah, it's kind of like that, the word expo. Yeah, great, classic. Nico, you love it. Yes, there was a 3-day conference on and a bit of a prelude to the conference as well, where they essentially, the Global Wellness Summit is very wide and assorted mixture of people who pretty much all are a part of the wellness industry, which is very broad. So you had people there from the Peninsula Hot Springs, people who run day spas or spas that are a part of very high and hotels around the world. So, Six Senses, stuff like that. And then you had guys talking about the evolution and phenomenon of hyperbaric chambers, which are like these high-level oxygen chambers that have got amazing research of regenerative tissue, like in the brain and then the rest of the body. So it was amazing because I want to share the one that I took away, and it's sort of been playing on my mind the last week or so since I've been back, and it was this guy who spoke about blue zones. I've never heard of a blue zone before. Have you?
Yes, I have.
Oh, okay.
Well, only because Han did her PhD on Crete, which is the Mediterranean island where people live the longest. So she's looked at like the diet component of it. or the
Yes,
way they
okay.
eat. Yeah.
And,
Anyway, carry on, though.
Han's big on the Mediterranean diet. I actually thought of
Yeah.
her. I
Yeah.
thought of her because an element of the Blue Zone
Yeah, it's only
is
part of it,
Mediterranean.
obviously. But yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what I learned was that a Blue Zone is where you have the people who live the longest in the world, like on average, and they don't just live till they're old, but they live quite healthily. So they have strong longevity. And actually, the guy who shared this, and I'm so terrible, I didn't put his name, but he went through the top 1, 2, 3 in the whole entire world, and he looks for what they call centurions. So they are people that have lived over 100 years old. What they do, their lifestyle, what they eat, everything. Number one was this tiny little town in Italy, and they had like a significant amount of people that had lived till they were over 110 years old. It's quite amazing. Number two was this really small, tiny little village in, I think, Okinawa in Japan. This like tiny little village. You'll never have heard of it before. And number three was a tiny little Seventh-day Adventist community in California. And what he's done with National Geographic is he's gone and studied these 3 key blue zones and some others, but these were the 3 main ones he shared with us. And this is what he's pulled out as being the common denominators of these places. Number one, they've got really fiber-rich diets. So their main sources of food are fiber-rich. And you'll see in the top 2 blue zones there, fava beans, surprisingly. So very high in fiber. And they actually only eat meat maybe 2, maybe 3 times a week in total. So not a lot. And they've got very sort of high plant-based diets. I'll keep going on here. They spend a lot of time in the garden or outside, but they do not go to gyms. You know, you can imagine these are very old school towns where you've got matriarchs of the family running the show, essentially. You got Nonna cooking in the kitchen. She's over 100 years old. She really is the backbone of the whole entire family, and she's got recipes she's passed down from literally for generations. And that was a key, a common denominator. And then they've all got some sort of like faith-based or, you know, like faith or religion base that they sort of bless their meal beforehand. They only eat till they're about 80% full. And their whole entire family, from the oldest to the youngest, is always involved in absolutely everything. So it's very much like a lifestyle thing, not they eat super healthy and go to the gym. It's none of that crap. It's just really simple, good lifestyles. And I kind of walked away from it, and, you know, I didn't go to the gym this morning, and I thought, well, you know, the centurions... That's not true. That's not what happened. But it kind of makes you feel
a daily ritual of coffee too, according to producer Nick. So I don't know.
Really?
What do you reckon? A double shot a day keeps you living longer?
Actually, they all have alcohol in their diets as well, but of course they don't do it to the excess we do in Western culture. But they have like a glass of wine with dinner or whatever. So it's more ritualistic and coming together than it is like got to eat to, you know, get my friggin' calorie intake in for the day or whatever it was. So there you go, cuz blue zones, and all of them, exactly like you said, have basically a offshoot of the Mediterranean diet. So
there you go, and a new life goal to live to 100.
Maybe not. Quality, not quantity.
So from one global problem being around the way that we live and how healthy we live our lives to another global problem. In fact,
oh my
a
God,
really big
so negative
problem in Australia, which is the problem of our rental market, and the fact that not only is it really tight to get a rental today, but naturally if you've got more people wanting a rental property than the rental properties themselves, you have a slight increase in homelessness. And so a lot of people theorising on some solutions. And one guy who had a great idea, which I think you and I really loved because it was left field, out of the box, is a gentleman by the name of Angus Moore, who is he's the chief economist at the REA Group, in other words, realestate.com company. He had a pretty out there idea around spare bedrooms, didn't he?
He did, and it's on reflection. It's a bit embarrassing how many spare bedrooms we all have because we live such privileged lives, don't we? Think about how many you've got.
I've got 3. I was ashamed to read it. Yeah,
I was ashamed too. So apparently we're in the majority. More than 70% of Australian households have at least one spare bedroom, and that's according to the census last year when we were all living at home. So probably some of the most accurate data. More than 1 in 10 households have 3 or more spare bedrooms. Oh my God, I got 2. I got 2.
And it adds up over the 10 million houses and 25 million people in Australia. He calculates that there is 3.5 million empty bedrooms today. You could literally house the whole of the homeless population of Australia quite a few times over.
It's just insane. 7% have fewer bedrooms than they do beds.
Correct, and look, the really he didn't necessarily propose a solution, did he? But what he did say is, hey, we've got 3.5 million bedrooms out there. Majority of people who have the spare bedrooms are empty nesters or people sort of in the early phases of wanting to build a family. He said the early phases of wanting to build a family maybe not as easy because they're going to fill them at some point. But the empty nesters, which he believes accounted for roughly 400,000 spare bedrooms throughout Australia at a minimum, he proposed surely there is a way to incentivise those people to make their bedrooms available for those who need it. And it's a big picture idea. It's left field, but I do love it. And obviously, the solution itself needs a bit of refining. The Queensland government, whilst I think you were away, or whilst I was away, have proposed to basically allow anyone in southeast Queensland who's got a granny flat that has its own bedroom to be able to rent it out, whether or not they have an approval. So clearly there is a need to think of those left field ideas to make it a little bit easier for tenants and or people who are sort of really struggling in the rental market at this moment.
Look, I think you're right. Like, there isn't an immediate solution, but bringing it to a head and sharing that information, it could, let's just say 100 people go, oh, geez, well, interest rates are going up, or, I'm worried about cost of living. I'll do a deal with the uni, or I'll put my spare bedroom on Airbnb. I don't know, but at least the data has come to a head and it can maybe give people ideas that are actually open to it. I would be. Husband definitely wouldn't be.
And then, well, yes, correct. And one last thing just on that before we move on, he had a great idea. He said, I reckon the way to deal with it is through stamp duty. Give people stamp duty discounts if they buy a house with spare bedrooms and make those bedrooms available for rent. What a great idea, because stamp duty, that is the one that hurts if you're a buyer, doesn't it? Because you don't really get any bang for buck for your stamp duty. Like, what are you getting? You're not really getting any sort of service or improvement to your quality of life.
You literally, you're getting a stamp on your passage through, That's a really hard one though, cuz look, a great idea, can't knock it, but it's a really hard one. How are they going to, the administration to actually oversee that just feels like a friggin' nightmare. But look, he had to come up with some kind of solution with a Boom Boom article, right? Didn't he?
All right, Cass, from one Boom Boom article to another Boom Boom article, whatever that is, whatever a Boom Boom article is, you can fill us in on that later.
Yeah, not sure.
Andrew Schwartz runs a company called Qualitas. They are probably the biggest non-bank lender to developers and builders around Australia. They don't just do residential, they do a lot of commercial and retail as well. However, he penned an article that got picked up in, I think it was The Australian last week, where he basically said, brace yourself for a residential property boom, and talked about why he thinks residential is the best place that you could be investing today because of the relationship that it has with inflation. And he had some interesting data, didn't he?
He did. Strap in, kids, he says, basically.
Strap in.
I found this interesting because they're not just focused on residential. So him coming out and saying this doesn't necessarily feed into his whole entire business. He's very diversified. So I thought it was interesting. So thank you for
no Nigel Satterley, this guy.
I think we refer to that often, and we probably lost half the listener base on what the hell we're talking about. But basically,
Sorry, guys.
he doesn't have a vested interest in what he's saying. Should we give the example that he's given in Sydney here?
Yeah, so he talks about in 1970 the price of a Sydney unit. Now, we'll assume his data's correct. It looks about right. $13,500 in 1970. He says that's the cost of a modest kitchen renovation today. I don't know who's building them for him, but I think that's even less than a kitchen renovation these days.
You'd be lucky to get one wall.
Maybe he wrote the article a while ago. Anyway, so he talks about the fact that 3 decades later, as Sydney prepared to host the Sydney Olympics, the unit cost about $260,000. So it's basically increased by just under 20 times in value in that 30 years.
Amazing. And I guess he goes on there to say, what's notable about the difference, apart from the remarkable 19 times in the 30-year period, is that they actually, in that time, had the highest inflation and therefore also interest rates. Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah.
To hit Australian households in living memory. And a lot of people go, oh, that's exactly the same as today. Well, no, because in 1990 they had a Reserve Bank of Australia cash rate of 17.5%. So some people were borrowing up near that 21%. So, maybe it's similar, maybe not, maybe to the person who's just entered the market, but get that, cuz. So they had a 19 times return in a 30-year period amongst highest inflation and interest rates in Australia's living history.
And I guess, the importance of the data is that data gives credibility, and his whole point is why he's confident in residential property. That data is, it's important in terms of giving his argument some background. And his argument is that just like in that 30-year period where interest rates were high, where inflation was around, and where over 30 years, a property increased in value by 19 to 20 times. He said that's why I think it's important to focus on the longer term. Try as hard as possible to avoid the noise of the day, which can create short-term distortions and feedback. And then goes on to say that I have no doubt the markets will be cyclical with some short-term volatility, but the longer-term fundamentals will play out. And he thinks that's why he's got so much confidence, which really what he's talking about there is the shortage of supply today. And we've talked about that in recent podcasts, but basically we just haven't built enough houses for 10 years, have we?
No, that's right. And that's accumulative, right? So it's compounding, if you will. It's not just a shortage one year, it's a shortage every year, and it compounds on each time. And now we've got 2 million visas coming into the country as a big old backlog. So, I just want to admit that, it's like I've got 5 properties, cuz I think you got 7 or 8 now, it is a little bit of a turbulent time, but, it's certainly not something that's making me want to sell. I think if anything, if you've got 1 or 5 or 10 properties, you just have to spend more time ensuring you know your numbers and what's actually happening. Can you take 3 to 1 bank and cross collateralize? Can you amalgamate them, or can you do a better deal? Just look outside the box. Don't accept everything that comes. It does mean more paperwork. It does mean a lot of fluffing around. But on the other side, you've also got rents going up at a really quick rate. Oh, James, I can see 2 of you now. So it is turbulent times, but not in a bad way. It's okay.
Well, key message being have a long-term view, but a plan for the short term as well, obviously, just to make sure that you can stay around and make it through and all those sorts of things. Having said that, though, interest rates, yes, they've gone up. Yes, we've got a bit of inflation, but I think what gets lost in the noise is that we're just getting back to normal. Yes, it feels like we've all got whiplash, and we probably do because it happens so quickly. But what we're sort of actually, if you look at all the data, we're just in sort of more normal times. We just got there really quickly. And that I think is the thing that everyone's got to keep a bit of perspective on.
Slingshot, cuz, slingshot. As one of my favourite rappers, Snoop Dogg, says, groovy like a drive-in movie. He actually does say that, though.
Is he your favourite rapper?
No, but I just he's got some gems.
Yes.
He's got some gems. He says groovy like
Yeah.
a drive-in movie. James,
I just think for some reason, I just think of the menu log ads when I think of Snoop Dogg these days.
well, that's effective marketing. One might
Isn't
say.
it? Isn't it?
Yeah,
Anyway, carry on. Drive-in movies.
Okay,
What about them?
Kaz, little pop quiz for you. One question: how many drive-in movie theaters do you reckon there are in Australia in operation today?
Ooh, well, there is one at Yatala, halfway between Brisbane and the
Still
Gold
there?
Coast. No,
Yep.
last time I went there was I think in 2020 because it was like the only
Oh.
way that you could see movies during the pandemic. Anyway, so that's only one that I know of. I would have a guess and say if there's one that close 20 in Australia.
Ooh, not too far. There's actually 12. But
Well, that's
in
not
the
a lot.
last no, not a lot at all. And there was 18 6 months ago. So more recent times in the last 6 months, 6 have sold, leaving us with 12 today. Now, a really interesting article that I read in the Urban Developer this week was basically there's a big drive-in movie in Dandenong. It's a 66-year-old drive-in movie theatre. Dandenong, by the way, is in Victoria's southeast. It's about a 30-minute drive down the freeway. That has recently gone up for sale. Now, yes, it is a little bit sad. It's been there 66 years, but the owner has sort of come out and said, look, it's difficult to run a business on land this size with the costs that go with it. Now, you've got to remember, drive-in movies are massive parcels of land, and you could say absolute gold mines, given that they're traditionally within or now well within industrial commercial zoning, which is absolutely booming today.
Especially industrial. Yeah.
Oh, it's mental, and especially in Dandenong here. So the guy who owns the place, he's what's his name here? It's I've lost it. But in any event, he said, look, we're not closing because of the lack of people. We've just come off our busiest summer ever. Admissions are up between $400,000 and $450,000 for the year alone. But our land tax bill is $410,000 in the last 2 years, and upcoming it'll be $700,000 because of the way the land value has increased. Insane, isn't it? So just to give you an idea, this is prime industrial land just off the freeway in Dandenong. It's nearly 6 hectares, zoned commercial too, so within industrial with 277 metres of frontage. It's tipping to sell for about $45 million.
Wow.
So you can say here it's sad and interesting after COVID when we were trying to have as little human contact as possible. So drive-in movies would have been sensational, but they are prime, massive parcels of land today that, we drive-in movie, although a great pastime, not its highest and best use case.
How much do you think it is to go to a drive-in movie? I'm trying to think. I reckon I paid about $20 last time I went.
Yeah, really? $20
Yeah.
like per car?
Well, per car, yeah, and normally getting at least 2 people in on a car.
They must make all their money on their like drinks and snacks.
Yeah, well, and if you've got so this fella's saying he's had 400 to 450,000 people come through each year. Now, I would assume that's cars because he says admissions. 400 and 450,000. One film for a car, in fact, at this particular drive-in is $40. So $40.
Ooh.
$40. So
You just got producer Nick on hand there, dude. Amazing. One carload, that's very cheap.
it is nice. So 400,000 cars at $40 per car is what, 16 million? $16 million a year in tickets. When Alex said revenue, but I think the quote says we've just come off our busiest summer ever. Our admissions are up between 400,000 and 450,000 per year, which I assume is cars. In which case,
I believe so.
$16 million. It's a decent return. Now, obviously, they've got costs, of which 700,000 goes to just their land tax. Probably got rates on top of that, and interest
Whole
and
kit
all that
and
sort of
caboodle.
thing.
But isn't
But it's
that
still
just
a
an
decent
interesting
money spinner. So obviously, you know, the fact that he's able to sell it for such a high price is playing into that as well, because $45 million, if you're paying that kind of money and probably only getting, I don't know, $4 or $5 million back, I assume. Anyway.
Amazing. There you go, Cuz. The big,
Hey, from one
big
big land
golden
tax
land.
bill to another, Lang Walker,
how's your segues today?
he's one of the wealthiest guys around, just under the Oracle,
Really rich.
Harry Tregaboff, when it comes to property magnates. He's got a private company called Walker Corp. You would see them around. It's like a little green W. They've got residential, they've got
Better men.
commercial, they've got retail, industrial. They do a bit of everything.
Yeah.
Made $675 million in profit after tax in the 2022 year. That was a 226% increase on the previous year. Not a bad year.
Mate, that's absolutely crazy. And what is it? He's got a revenue growing to $1.13 billion. And that's across his development and investment portfolio. My understanding is that he's got a total asset value of something like $8.2 billion, which is up 21%. And his biggest two projects, number one, he's got Parramatta Square, which is a very big commercial precinct. So you've got your big guys like Deloitte's and whatnot, your big sort of commercial employers that have got maybe 3 or 4 levels of commercial office space. And guess what, Kaz? His second biggest project in Australia is Riverlea.
I
which is
knew
in
it
South
was going to be
Australia.
something to do with Adelaide. The moment that you went there, I thought, oh, Queen of the
Yeah.
North is back. What's
She's
that?
back.
Some northern Adelaide suburb that you're talking about?
Yep, pretty much exactly.
Okay.
Pretty much exactly. So
Your
in the last
playground.
12 months, he's had over 1,000 residential lot sales. Do you know how much that is for one estate in Adelaide? Like that's
a lot.
It's a record breaker, but that is one of the biggest master plan communities. It's probably the biggest in South Australia and one of the biggest in Australia.
So basically, what I'm hearing is
Yes.
you single-handedly decided that we needed to buy a lot of land down there, and so did one of the most successful property identities in Australia. So you're pretty much as smart as he is. Is that what
We've
you're
got
trying
the
to?
same-
Is that what
we've
you're
got the
leading us
same
here? Is that the
sniffer.
conclusion that we're getting at?
Kaz, you know what? I'm indispensable. We've got the same sniffer. I can do whatever I want because you can't find me because I'm that good.
Hey,
Mate, just a note. He took about 14 years to get that through council, so he's been there a lot longer than me. But isn't that beautiful timing? He released it before the housing boom.
Look, the other thing that I will say is buried in the last line of this newspaper article. He made $675 million in profit after tax, but $635 million of that was in revaluations of his property. So he only actually made $40
Asset
million
value.
bucks in the hand. Which
And what-
only $40 million bucks. Still a very good year.
Did that not also happen with Jerry Harvey Norman? It was all in the
Correct.
asset value.
Correct.
What can I say? What can I
Sometimes
say?
devil's in the detail.
The devil is always in the detail. Ask Terry Nassar; he'll tell you. Now, what else you got for me this week? Any
I thought,
closing remarks or
a couple of things.
little tidbits?
A couple of things. Auctions, highest we've had in 5 months. Always like to
praise
keep an
the
eye on
Lord.
those because November is we're starting to get into the most busiest weekends when it comes to auctions. Interestingly, Sydney was leading the charge, had the highest clearance rate outside of Adelaide, which has been shooting the lights out for about 2 years straight. Adelaide's 79%, Sydney 70%. So very, very healthy, up significantly on a couple of months ago when they were in the 50s, still tad below last year, and Melbourne's starting to pick up as well, some healthy numbers. So we'll keep an eye on that. And the other one that I'm going to say is like a bit of a misleading article.
Oh, okay.
Is loan
Call it out.
loan data. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics release every month data on how many people have taken out loans, new loans to buy property because it excludes refinances. And the headline was that loans to purchase properties was down 20 and 33%. So 20% for existing houses, 33% for the building of new houses year on year. So that's comparing September 2022 to September 2021. However,
Tell us what's wrong.
Well, in keeping with the theme of our previous comments, we're getting back to normal. The numbers are still significantly higher than they were in September 2019. In fact, still 50% higher than before the pandemic. So, yes, not at the alarmingly sky-high rates that we were seeing this time last year, at a more manageable but still very high rate, though, in September this year.
Makes you wonder, cuz how many of that is still the come down of home builder? Because I know a few people that bought, sort of March last year and they've been waiting for titles and they've just recently got titles. So they've started to build. So, I just happen to wonder.
I don't know, but in the last 12 months, we have taken out a grand total of just under $400 million worth of loans. And in fact, that must be, 400 million. And that compares with about 210 million in 2019. So
Double.
That's, I think, an example of what Andrew Schwartz was talking about with not getting too caught up in the headlines that distract. Still pretty healthy out there. People still able to get loans. It's not the end of the world, guys. You can still get a loan.
Oh, cuz I'm glad you said it because I just feel a bit calmer about things now. It's not the jet lag waking me up at 2 a.m.
We might wrap it up there, actually. Tell me, though, how is the jet lag? Because coming back from Europe for me, going west to east, smashed me. I reckon it got me for a good week.
Tell you what, I got in Friday morning, went straight to the office. I was emailing at 4 a.m. I was a fucking hero on Friday, let me tell you that. And oh, how the mighty have fallen.
What have we got from you today? Appearance fee only?
No. Today's a lot better, so I can actually thank myself for giving myself the weekend because, I was good for nothing. Good for absolutely nothing. Couldn't even make myself a sandwich. Poor husband didn't get to enjoy the nice outdoors with me. I was just a shell of myself. But you know what? It's only up from here. And I got to say, a little recording at the start of the week is always the best way to kick it all off with you, Cuzzy.
Well, apparently the statistics are that it is twice as hard to recover from jet lag going west to east than it is east to west. It is a proven thing. So, for example, if you're going over to America, you'll normally get jet lag on the way there. Whereas from Europe, you'll get it on the way back.
Well, I thought I was bulletproof in jet lag because the last 2 times I've gone overseas, a little bit of tiredness early in the night, but that's it. This time, complete brain fog.
Yeah, I don't think New Zealand counts though.
Wrap it up.
All right, guys, go get some sleep. Thanks, listeners.
I'm not counting in New Zealand.
And shout out to Glenn who wrote to us. We'll talk about this in the quick shots later this week. Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks,
and
Glenn.
anyone else who wants to send us in some questions or some feedback. We've been getting some who've got some great ideas, which we love. Send them through. Our email's in the show notes. Recommend us to friends. We love it. We know that you clearly are, so we value the fact that you do that. And stay around for quick shots later in the week.
Plus, boy. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.